The night air in Bethlehem was shattered by a sound that no history book can adequately capture. The shrieks of mothers, the tearing of garments, the metallic scrape of Roman steel drawn in the narrow, dusty alleys of a Judean village. We call it the Massacre of the Innocents. When King Herod ordered the slaughter of every male child under the age of 2 in Bethlehem, we often read it as just another footnote of ancient tyranny, a mad king desperately clinging to his crown. But if you strip away the stained-glass familiarity of the Christmas story and look at the raw, unvarnished historical record, a chilling realization sets in. Look closely at the man sitting on the throne in Jerusalem. Herod the Great was not a Jewish king. He was an Idumean. An Edomite. Sit with the weight of this for a moment. The man commanding the death of the prophesied Jewish king was a direct descendant of Esau. And the baby he was trying to murder was the ultimate, promised descendant of Jacob. What happened in Bethlehem was not merely first-century Roman politics. It was the explosive, bloody climax of a 2,000-year-old family feud. It was Esau, reaching across the millennia, trying to kill Jacob one last time. To understand the blood on the cobblestones of Bethlehem, we cannot simply start in the Gospel of Matthew. We have to look at the stones Herod built, and the psychological terror that built them. History and archaeology paint a portrait of Herod that is both magnificent and monstrous. He was a man driven by a clinical, consuming paranoia. Caesar Augustus himself once infamously joked that it was safer to be Herod's pig than to be Herod's son. And the archaeology of the Levant bears the scars of his obsession with security and legacy. If you travel to Israel today, you cannot escape his ghost. He poured hydraulic concrete into the Mediterranean Sea to build the artificial deep-water harbor of Caesarea Maritima, defying the very ocean. He built Masada, an impenetrable, luxurious fortress suspended in the clouds above the Dead Sea, stocked with decades' worth of food. He even built the Herodium, a place where he literally ordered a mountain to be decapitated and its earth piled onto another hill just to build a palace that would serve as his tomb. Why such manic, monumental defensive building? Because Herod knew a terrifying truth: he had no legitimate right to the throne. The Idumeans, Herod's people, had been forcibly converted to Judaism by the Hasmonean dynasty decades earlier. In the eyes of the Jewish religious elite, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, Herod was a half-Jew. An impostor. He did not have the blood of David in his veins. He had bought his title, King of the Jews, from the Roman Senate in 40 BC. He married the Hasmonean princess Miriam to legitimize his rule, only to have her executed out of jealous paranoia, along with his own sons, his mother-in-law, and anyone who even breathed a hint of treason. This is the volatile, powder-keg context of the Nativity. Imagine the scene: Herod is in the twilight of his life, his body rotting from a historically documented, agonizing disease, his mind fractured by paranoia. Suddenly, an entourage of Parthian kingmakers, the Magi, arrives in his court. And they ask a question that cuts straight through to Herod's deepest, darkest insecurity: where is he who is born King of the Jews? Born. Not appointed by Rome. Not bought with silver. Born. For Herod, this was not just a political threat. It was an existential nightmare. But this insecurity, this violent clutching for power, did not originate in the marbled halls of Herod's palace. We have to rewind the tape of history. We have to go back long before Rome, long before the empires of iron and bronze. This bloodlust started over a boiling pot of red lentil stew. Genesis chapter 25 pulls back the curtain on the origins of this cosmic conflict. Two twin boys, Esau and Jacob, struggling violently within the womb of Rebekah. God tells her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you shall be divided." Esau is the firstborn. The strong, rugged hunter. The one entitled to the covenant blessing of Abraham. But one day, exhausted and famished from the field, Esau smells the red stew his brother Jacob is cooking. Jacob demands the birthright in exchange for the meal. And Esau agrees. We often read this as a story of a hungry man making a foolish, impulsive mistake. But this is not random history, this is theology. The text says, "Thus Esau despised his birthright." He held the eternal promises of God in contempt. He chose the immediate gratification of the flesh over the eternal purpose of the Spirit. That single, fateful decision set off a historical domino effect that would drench the Middle East in blood for centuries. The core of sin is never just an isolated mistake, it is a repeated, generational choice of pride, self-sufficiency, and rebellion against God's sovereign election. The descendants of Esau became the nation of Edom. And the defining characteristic of Edom throughout the Old Testament was an arrogant, impenetrable pride. Look at the geography. Edom settled in the rocky, mountainous region south of the Dead Sea, the land of Seir, famously home to the impregnable city of Petra, carved directly into the rose-red cliffs. Because they lived in the heights of the rocks, they believed no one could bring them down. The prophet Obadiah writes an entire book indicting Edom for this specific arrogance. The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rock, who say in your heart, who will bring me down to the ground? Whenever Israel, the descendants of Jacob, were vulnerable, Edom struck. When Moses asked for safe passage through their land during the Exodus, Edom met them with the sword. When the Babylonians breached the walls of Jerusalem and slaughtered the Jews, Psalm 137 records that the Edomites stood on the sidelines, cheering, shouting, "Tear it down! Tear it down to its foundations." So, when King Herod, the ultimate Edomite, ruling from the heights of his own fortified rocks, hears that a son of Jacob, a true son of David, has been born in Bethlehem, the ancient enmity boils over. The massacre of the innocents is the final, desperate strike of the flesh trying to assassinate the promise of the Spirit. But history is not written by the oppressors. It is written by the sovereign God who orchestrates every detail, every movement of empires, to protect his redemptive plan. As Herod's soldiers march toward Bethlehem, an angel warns Joseph. The Holy Family flees in the dead of night. They escape to Egypt. And even in this terrifying displacement, God is weaving a masterpiece of prophetic fulfillment. The prophet Hosea had written centuries earlier, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Originally referring to the nation of Israel, God now focuses the entirety of Israel's history down to a single, perfect focal point, Jesus Christ. The true Israel. The true Son. While Herod rages, God quietly preserves the seed. But the story does not end with survival. Because if you study the grand, sweeping narrative of Scripture, you discover the most staggering paradox of the ancient world. God does not merely defeat his enemies. He uses them. We have arrived at the ultimate theological twist. If you go to Jerusalem today and stand before the Western Wall, you are looking at massive, monolithic stones, some weighing upwards of 400 tons. These are the retaining walls of the Temple Mount. Who built them? Herod the Great. Herod's most ambitious architectural achievement was not a fortress. It was the Second Temple. He took the modest temple built by Zerubbabel after the Babylonian exile and transformed it into a wonder of the ancient world. He doubled the size of the Temple Mount. He imported the finest marble. The Roman historian Josephus wrote that the temple was covered in so much gold that when the sun rose over the Mount of Olives, looking at the sanctuary was like looking directly into the sun. Why did Herod build it? Not for the glory of Yahweh. He built it as a massive PR campaign to appease the Jewish subjects who despised him, and to immortalize his own name in stone. He funded it with crushing taxation, extortion, and the blood of his enemies. Read that slowly in the theater of your mind. The most spectacular religious structure of the ancient world was financed by a paranoid, murderous, Edomite dictator. But look at what the sovereignty of God did. God took the billions of denarii plundered by the enemy, he took the architectural genius of a tyrant, and he bent it all to build the very stage upon which the Son of God would change the world. 12 years after Herod died, his body consumed by worms, his legacy crumbling, the boy who escaped his swords returned to Jerusalem. Jesus of Nazareth walked up the steps of the Temple Mount. He sat in the magnificent courtyards built by the man who tried to kill him. He astounded the religious teachers with his wisdom. Years later, Jesus would walk those same Herodian colonnades, healing the blind, making the lame leap for joy, and teaching the gospel of the kingdom. Jesus cleansed that temple, claiming it not as Herod's monument, but as his Father's house. The enemy of God literally footed the bill to build the stage for the gospel. Herod thought he was building a monument to his own invincibility. God used Herod to construct the theater where the final, perfect sacrifice for human sin would be declared. The cross of Christ stands as the ultimate victory over the pride of Edom. Where Esau despised his inheritance for a bowl of stew, Jesus Christ, the true firstborn, relinquished the glory of heaven and became obedient to the point of death to secure an eternal inheritance for us. This is where the ancient dust of Jerusalem settles right into your living room. Because history is a mirror. And if we look closely enough at the stones of Herod's temple, we see our own reflections. We serve a God who sits outside of time, untouched by the panic of our present circumstances. And I need to ask you a deeply confrontational question today: what, Herod, is building a fortress in your life right now? Perhaps it is a generational cycle of addiction or abuse that feels as impregnable as Masada. Perhaps it is a financial ruin, an unjust termination, a slanderous accusation, or a chronic illness that feels like a sword drawn against your future. What is the force in your life that seems to hold the absolute power of life and death over your destiny? We spend so much time terrified of the Herods in our lives. We weep over the unfairness of the opposition. But the profound, unshakable truth of biblical theology is this: the enemy does not get the final word. The devil may be allowed to wield the hammer, but God is the architect of the house. The very forces attempting to destroy you, the very people plotting your downfall, the very circumstances that seem designed to bury you, God can, and will, bend them to build the scaffolding of your ultimate calling. He will take the raw materials of your trauma and your opposition, and he will construct a stage for his glory and your deliverance. So, what is God preparing in your story, in the very places where doors are slamming shut? Thank you for watching this series. If this shifted your perspective on how God operates through history, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Pick up a copy of my book, Beyond the Letter, to uncover the deeper historical and theological truths hiding in plain sight, and keep digging deeper into the scriptures. The King is on his throne, and he is working all things together for good.